A couple of years ago I did a video called Doctor Who Needs Better LGBTQ Representation, which, as the title suggests, focused on the state of LGBTQ+ representation in the show at that time during the Jodie Whittaker era. Spoilers, it wasn't great. And now that it's Pride Month again, I figured it would be a good opportunity to revisit that and see how things have changed now that we're in a different era with a new Doctor. I won't be speaking with my usual authority for the entirety of this video, mainly because there are aspects of representation where there's not necessarily been a consensus within the LGBTQ community on what is a good artistic choice and what isn't. For instance, having Rose Noble be dead named at one point in the Star Beast is perhaps unnecessary, but then I have seen some trans people argue that scene is important to show that this is one of the ways in which trans people are harassed, and it would be inauthentic to not show that. And it's not my place to stick my oar in and have an opinion with regard to those conversations, so if you want someone who can speak with more authority, go watch LGBTQ Doctor Who content creators like Council of Geeks or Jessie Gender. I'll probably link to a few of them in the description. So with that out of the way, let's get on with the video. Probably the most topical example of LGBTQ representation in Doctor Who at the moment is from the episode Rogue, which I think actually makes for a good direct comparison with the Jodie Whittaker era, specifically with the Thasmin subplot, because that was Chris Chibnall's half-baked attempt at doing a gay romance subplot involving the Doctor, and one of my major concerns with that at the time was the power imbalance involved in that relationship, with the Doctor being a thousands of years old alien with a magical time-travelling box, and Yaz being a human with a conventional life span. Of course, it might have been possible to address that power imbalance and work through all of that baggage, but Chibnall clearly hadn't really thought it through and wasn't prepared to put the time and effort into developing Thasmin, because it wasn't ever a story he really wanted to tell. It was just a cheap fan-pandering move that ultimately ended up being nothing more than queerbaiting. With the titular character from Rogue, by contrast, we are introduced to someone who is an intergalactic bounty hunter with his own fancy spaceship, so in that sense he's immediately on a much more equal footing with Ncuti Gatwa's Doctor. This isn't to say that as an LGBTQ romance subplot it's perfect by any means, I really need to emphasise that, and arguably, as was the case with Thasmin, it does end up feeling rushed, with it all taking place within one 45-minute episode. But at least this time we did get to see an on-screen kiss, which, for as much as it no doubt upset the NMDs, partly because it's also interracial, this really shouldn't be a big deal. It's not even the first time that the Doctor has kissed someone of the same gender on screen, and with this incarnation of the Doctor being so flamboyant and sexually liberated, and Rogue basically being like a toned down, more brooding version of Captain Jack Harkness, I can sort of buy things moving that quickly. What I would really like to discuss, though, is the state of transgender representation in Doctor Who, because that was the show's main failing the last time we did this, and prior to the current era, trans representation was, as Josh Snares put it, essentially non-existent. I think it's fair to say that things have improved since then, in the sense that we do have examples of trans people appearing in the show now besides Bitchy Trampoline and Literal Mindless Grunt, though that obviously isn't saying much. There was Jinkx Monsoon, the drag performer, who I believe goes by she-her pronouns, though her character, the Maestro, is they-them. Maestro is of course the villain, and there is a whole ongoing conversation about whether trans actors should be cast as villains. Council of Geeks did a pretty good dissection of the topic, which I'll put a link up to now, but that's another matter where I'm personally not going to stick my oar in. That being said, it probably is a better look if your trans villain is not the only example of representation in your TV show, which of course Maestro isn't, because there's also Ruby's friend Trudy, who appears briefly in the church on Ruby Road as the singer in Ruby's band, and is really just a background character. Having background characters be LGBTQ+ is okay, provided that you don't just use them as cannon fodder and they aren't the only examples of representation, because then it comes across as very tokenistic and can easily be edited out in countries with stricter censorship laws and so on. And again, Trudy is not the only example of non-villainous representation, because prior to that we had Rose Noble, who was very much a main focus of the story she was in. Now, as good as all of that might be, it's not my place to be heaping praise onto a TV show on behalf of a marginalised group, so this is where we're going to get into the more critical stuff. As I pointed out in my review of the Star Beast, Rose does kind of get screwed over in that episode, with how she is the one to first discover the Meep, but then we don't even get to see how she reacts to the Meep turning evil. It feels like there's a whole section of her character arc essentially missing, presumably because Russell T Davies felt that having more nostalgia-pandering scenes with the Doctor and Donna was the higher priority, which is a shame. Then there's the whole confusion with her identity, with the ending that seems to imply Rose is non-binary, even though that was never indicated before in Yasmin Finney is, to my knowledge, a binary trans woman. I guess her being non-binary might have been intentional all along, but the way it comes across is more like Davies wanted to do something with the binary line from Journey's End and didn't really think the implications of it through. And this ties into the broader issue of not just LGBTQ representation, but all representation and progressive messaging in Doctor Who at the moment, which is that Davies seems to be overly fixated on posturing as opposed to actually thinking it through and doing the legwork. An example of what I mean is the fuss that RTD made about having the 13th Doctor's outfit regenerate with her because something about the Doctor being in drag, which really seems quite redundant when you consider that Jodie Whittaker's outfit was deliberately designed to be gender neutral. Then there's the whole deal with Davros, which obviously isn't directly related to the LGBTQ community, but again it reeks of being another unwarranted knee-jerk attempt at making a progressive statement, given that, to my knowledge, and if you are a disabled person, do correct me if I'm wrong, Davros being in a wheelchair was never something that anyone really considered to be deeply problematic. Returning to the Starbeast, there's also the clunky line about the Doctor being a male-presenting Time Lord, which on a surface level is clearly some kind of progressive feminist statement, but actually it's arguably transphobic given that Rose and Donna are essentially mocking the Doctor because they used to be a woman and have now changed their gender. Although Davies' approach is admittedly somewhat more confrontational with the way he's going about it, this is in essence the same problem that the Chibnall era had with representation, in that it's very facile. In the Jodie Whittaker episodes we had inclusive slogans in the marketing like space for all, but the substance wasn't really there to back it up. As I said before, trans representation, if you don't count the Doctor, was basically non-existent. And similarly with Russell T Davies, while I do appreciate his uncompromising approach and the fact he's not afraid to rile up the bigots, if you go about it haphazardly, then at a certain point it does become, dare I say it, virtue signalling, where you're just giving ammunition to the haters without actually having a positive impact on the marginalised groups you're representing. I do hesitate to use the term virtue signalling as it's kind of been diluted of all meaning at this point and is mainly used as a dog whistle term for bigotry, but it is probably the most accurate way to describe what Davies and the production team have been doing a lot of the time. I'd like to finish by reiterating once again that I am not an authority on this subject, and if you do have any thoughts or opinions of your own, particularly if you are a member of the LGBTQ community, I would definitely like to hear them, so do leave your comments down below. Also, I'm going to be raising funds for LGBTQ charities this month. I'll put links to the donation pages to Stonewall and Mermaids in the description, so any amount you can donate would be very much appreciated. I have multiple friends who are LGBTQ, so it would really mean a lot to me. Thank you. I'm Midnight, and I just lost my train of thought.